Under the cool, starlit sky in the small Ghana village of Asempa, Sandra burst into her brother Williams's modest home. Her eyes shone with fear as her body trembled from the night's chill. Clutched in her arms was a tiny baby wrapped in a threadbare coat, while her own shirt was torn and barely covered her frail figure. Williams swung open the door and stopped short at the sight of his beloved sister. "Sandra, what happened?" he asked, his voice low with worry. Without hesitation, he stepped aside and ushered her into the warmth of the living room, quickly stoking the small fire that fought back the cool night air. As the flames danced, Sandra's teeth chattered. In a soft, trembling whisper, she pleaded, "Please, Williams, help me, someone hurt me badly." Williams's eyes filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. "Who did this to you, Sandra? Tell me everything," he urged, his tone both firm and tender. Once, Sandra had been a dedicated nurse who cared for others with all her heart. She had set aside her promising career to build a life with Charles, a kind and efficient man whose gentle nature had won her love. Their shared dreams had painted a picture of stability and joy. Yet now, that dream lay shattered before them. Sitting together by the glowing embers, Williams recalled their childhood with a heavy heart. After losing their parents in a terrible accident when Sandra was only 4 and he still a child, their father's last words, "I am counting on you to protect Sandra," had echoed in his mind. Ever since that fateful day, he had vowed to be her guardian, her hero. Gazing into the flickering light, Williams softly reassured her, "You are safe now, Sandra. I promise I will not let anyone hurt you again." Tears glistened in Sandra's eyes as she managed a shaky smile. "Thank you, Williams. I don't know what I'd do without you." Just then, Charles arrived at the door. His concern was evident as he stepped into the room. "Sandra, I was so worried," he said, wrapping an arm around her. "Are you all right?" She nodded slowly, replying, "I feel broken tonight, but with you both by my side, I feel a spark of hope." Williams added firmly, "We will face this together. I won't rest until I find out who did this and make sure you're protected." Later, as the night deepened and the quiet sounds of the distant savannah mingled with the soft crackle of the fire, memories of happier times surfaced. They remembered how, as children, they had been welcomed into the loving care of their grandparents, Arthur and Elizabeth. The grandparents had lived in a nearby town and were well known for Arthur's beautiful pottery, which often sold for as much as $500, keeping the family secure even in hard times. In the gentle glow of the firelight, the small family talked quietly about the past, their hopes, and the uncertain future. Williams's steady voice filled the room as he vowed, "No matter how dark this night may be, we will find a way back to the light. I promise you, Sandra, we will overcome this pain." Sandra listened, clinging to every word, and for the first time in a long while, she felt that maybe tomorrow could be better. Though the night was filled with heartbreak and the chill of loss, the warmth of family and the promise of protection shone through. In that intimate moment, surrounded by love and hope, Sandra realized that even in the darkest hours, there is always a new dawn waiting to break. The gentle crackle of the fire filled the room in the quiet village of Asempa as Sandra and Williams sat close together. The warmth of the embers stirred memories of a long-ago childhood, a time when life was simpler, yet every day was full of wonder. "Do you remember those nights in the countryside?" Williams asked softly, his eyes reflecting both joy and pain. Sandra nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. "Yes, I remember sitting by the open fire in our little clay house, listening to Grandma Elizabeth's stories. They made even the coldest nights feel magical." Their voices dropped to a tender murmur as the past came flooding back. Growing up in a humble village in rural Kenya, Williams and Sandra had found peace amid the simple rhythms of life. Their grandfather, Arthur, was a strict man when it came to his craft. He believed in doing things the honest way, and his pottery, each piece crafted with care, sometimes sold for as much as $500, keeping the family secure. Yet, behind his stern ways, Arthur always showered them with love. "Grandpa always said, honesty is worth more than gold," Williams recalled with a wistful smile. "And Grandma's hugs were the warmest shelter," Sandra added. "She would tell us stories of old heroes and faraway lands, making us dream even when we had little." Williams leaned closer, his voice gentle. I remember when I did well in school and played sports. I was so proud to be chosen to study at the prestigious university in the city. But even then, I never forgot to come back and help when Grandma Elizabeth grew ill. Sandra's eyes glistened. I wanted to leave everything and be by your side, but you insisted I continue my nursing studies. I still feel grateful for that choice, even when it was so hard. A brief silence fell as they both remembered the bittersweet days that followed. Sandra had finished nursing school and then met Charles at the hospital. His kind smile and caring nature had sparked a new hope in her heart. Their wedding had been a joyful celebration, filled with laughter, warm embraces, and even a few tears as photos of their late parents reminded everyone of what was lost, and what was worth fighting for. I will never forget your excitement on your wedding day, Williams said, his voice proud yet soft. Even though Grandma left us only 6 months later, you kept going. You became the strong, loving woman we all look up to. Sandra managed a small smile. Charles has been a bright light for me. I tried to create a perfect life, but sometimes the shadows sneak in. I still wonder if I'm strong enough to face what comes next. Just then, as if on cue, a soft knock came at the door. Williams exchanged a worried glance with Sandra. The sound carried an unfamiliar tone, stirring a hint of unease. In the quiet of that night, every sound felt amplified, the distant call of a night bird, the whisper of the wind through the window, and now, the gentle knock that promised change. Williams stood and walked to the door, his heart pounding. I'll see who that is, he murmured. Sandra reached out, her hand trembling yet determined. Be careful, Williams, she whispered. As Williams opened the door, the firelight danced on his face, and outside, a mysterious figure paused in the doorway. The promise of new challenges and untold secrets hung in the air. The night was far from over, and the echoes of the past mingled with the uncertainty of what was yet to come. Years ago, after the mysterious night at Williams's home, memories of another dark chapter flooded Sandra's mind. In the warm light of early dawn over the village of Asempa in Ghana, she recalled how, after her wedding, she had sought comfort from her husband Jack's family. Expecting their first child and still grieving the loss of her own father, Sandra had believed that moving in with Jack's family would bring her the care she so desperately needed. Jack's father, Mr. Carter, had welcomed her with a gentle smile. Sandra, this house is now yours. Rest here and heal, just as you deserve, he had said in a kind, reassuring tone. For Sandra, who had grown up without a father, his words felt like a precious blessing. But not all in the household shared that kindness. Mrs. Carter, Jack's mother, soon showed a colder side. One quiet evening in the kitchen, as Sandra stirred a pot of soup. Mrs. Carter snapped, you only came here to steal Jack's attention, you shameless flirt. Sandra's voice trembled as she replied, I only want to care for our family. I want nothing more than to do my duty. Her gentle words vanished into the charged silence of the room, leaving behind a sting that would not soon fade. The cruelty grew more daring with each passing day. On a chilly afternoon, while Sandra carefully set the table, Mrs. Carter deliberately tipped a pot of boiling water near her feet. Watch yourself, Mrs. Carter shouted, her eyes alight with anger. Sandra winced, her body shaking with both pain and disbelief. In another heart-wrenching moment, Sandra discovered sharp pins hidden in her food. Alone in the quiet of the kitchen, she whispered to herself, why would anyone do this to me? The thought of harm coming to her unborn child tightened the knot of fear in her heart. At family dinners, the verbal assaults grew louder. One night, amid the clatter of cutlery and murmurs of the other family members, Jack suddenly exploded in anger. Sandra, why can't you do anything right? He shouted in front of everyone. Tears streamed down Sandra's face as she managed to say, I'm trying my best to keep us together. But Jack was unyielding. You are not worthy of sitting with us, he declared, his voice echoing with hurtful finality. When Mr. Carter fell gravely ill and was confined to his bed, the full weight of the household duties fell on Sandra's shoulders. She cooked, cleaned, and cared for her baby, all while enduring constant ridicule. One evening, as the family sat down to dinner, Mrs. Carter sneered, a housekeeper like you does not deserve real food. Eat these leftovers and be grateful. Sandra sat silently, her eyes downcast, as the others devoured their meals in polite chatter. The relentless abuse soon began to show on her face. One morning, as she caught a glimpse of herself in a cracked mirror, she barely recognized the tired, gaunt woman with hollow cheeks and dark, heavy circles under her eyes. Later that day, Jack, his voice thick with disdain, told her, "I'm ashamed to be seen with you." With that, he ordered her to retire to a cramped storage room where she was left to sleep on a cold, hard floor. When her baby cried in the quiet of the night, both Jack and Mrs. Carter complained loudly, their voices a constant reminder of her unending torment. Yet, amid the cruelty, a small ember of hope remained. One hushed night, as Sandra tried to soothe her fussy baby, Mr. Carter, his voice weak but caring, came close and whispered, "Sandra, I see the pain you suffer here. I wish I could stop it for you." With trembling hands, he pressed a small bundle of cash, dollars that might not seem like much but shone with the promise of escape, into her grasp. "Take this, my dear. Find a way out for you and your child," he urged softly. Clutching the money, Sandra's heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. She knew deep down that it was now or never. In the stillness of that long, troubled night, with her baby resting softly against her chest, she made a silent vow to herself. "I must find a better future," she whispered, barely audible, as a single tear traced down her cheek. In the quiet hours before dawn, as the village of Asempa slept under a sky sprinkled with stars, Sandra felt the stirring of courage. Though her path was shrouded in uncertainty and pain, the promise of a new beginning glimmered in her heart. The road ahead would be hard and the dangers many, but she resolved that her journey would not end here. Sandra's father-in-law's weary eyes softened as he wheeled himself closer. "Sandra, my dear," he whispered, voice trembling with regret, "I never meant for you to suffer like this. I should have protected you better." William stood firmly by her side, his voice steady. "It's not too late to right our wrongs, Mr. Carter, but Sandra must be free from this abuse. You know it, and deep down, you know it too." At that moment, Jack's sneer faded into uncertainty as he and his mother exchanged shocked glances. Jack's mother demanded, "When did you record all of this? How could you betray us with your own words?" Sandra's hand tightened around the small recording device. "I did it so that you could finally see the truth," she said softly yet resolutely. "I deserve respect, and so does my child." Jack's voice faltered. "You're leaving. I don't understand. We have a family." Sandra's eyes, though wet with tears, burned with determination. "Our family has become a prison of cruelty. I won't live in fear any longer." Williams stepped forward, his tone calm but forceful. "I am a qualified lawyer, Sandra, and I will stand by you. The evidence speaks for itself. We have no choice but to break these chains." In the quiet that followed, Mr. Carter added, "I have saved a small sum, $200, for you. It isn't much, but it might be the seed for a new start. I hope you can use it to secure a safer place, somewhere you and your baby can heal." As dawn began to lighten the sky over Asempa, a close friend of the family, Edward, joined the tense gathering. "Sandra, I've heard about your suffering," he said kindly. "Our community has a small support fund. Every dollar helps, and I promise to do what I can to add to that. We stand with you." Sandra cradled her baby close and looked around at the faces before her, faces filled with sorrow, regret, and a newfound resolve. "Thank you," she murmured. "I've spent so long in darkness. Now I must step into the light, even if it is a small, uncertain light." Later that morning, in the modest sitting room of her grandfather's mountain home, Sandra and Williams huddled over a rough sketch of their next steps. Williams traced out a plan on a faded notepad. "First, we'll contact a trusted lawyer from the city who specializes in these cases. Then, we'll file for a restraining order. After that, we must decide where you and the baby can stay safely while the divorce proceedings begin." Sandra's voice quivered as she asked, "Will Jack try to stop us? What if he comes after us?" Williams met her gaze steadily. "I have already arranged for safe transport. We'll keep a low profile for a while. The community here in Asempa is strong and values justice." We'll rely on our neighbors for support. Outside, the early morning breeze carried the scent of damp earth and promise. Edward's earlier offer of community funds was a reminder that, despite the pain, there were people who cared and were willing to help. As they prepared to leave the room, Mr. Carter, still seated in his wheelchair by the doorway, spoke once more with a heavy heart. I know I cannot undo the past, but I will do everything I can to help you start a new life, Sandra. Remember, true strength is found in the courage to change your destiny. Sandra paused, glancing down at her sleeping baby. I want to give my child a future free from fear, a future built on hope and dignity. Williams gently squeezed her hand. And we will fight for that future together. Tonight is not the end of your story, but the beginning of a new chapter. We have much to prepare, and many challenges lie ahead, but you are not alone. With the rising sun casting a warm glow over Asempa, the family made plans to meet the lawyer later that day. The tension was still thick in the air, yet within that tension flickered a spark of hope. Each step they took, from retrieving Sandra's meager belongings at the in-laws' storage room to gathering the evidence of abuse, was a step toward reclaiming a life of respect and safety. As the village slowly awoke, Sandra's heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with obstacles, but she had found strength in the unity of those who cared for her. And so, in the quiet hours before the day was fully born, Sandra, Williams, and their allies prepared to challenge the cruelty that had shadowed her life for far too long, ready to fight for a future where hope would guide each new dawn. Later that afternoon, the tension in Asempa grew even heavier. Mr. Carter, his eyes filled with sorrow and resolve, stood and announced in a quiet yet firm tone, I have gathered recordings of my wife's relentless abuse. I, too, have prepared divorce papers. I cannot live like this any longer. Mrs. Carter's face twisted in anger. You think you can just leave me? She sneered. I will return to my wealthy brother and live in luxury, far away from this disgrace. At that moment, Sandra's renowned grandfather, Grandpa Henry, the gifted potter whose works once brought hope and comfort, stepped forward. He picked up his phone and, with steady determination, made a call that would change everything. I am terminating the deal for my high-end pottery at your department store, he said calmly. Your store was counting on it, but now, that lifeline is gone. Almost immediately, a stern voice crackled over the line. Henry, what do you mean? This deal was our chance to recover. The voice belonged to Mrs. Carter's wealthy brother, and his shock only deepened the silence that followed. Realizing her future was far less secure than she had imagined, Mrs. Carter's defiant stance faltered. Overwhelmed by the collapse of her plans, she sank to her knees. Between tears, she pleaded, Sandra, please, change your mind. I beg you, forgive me. Sandra met her gaze with ice in her eyes. I will never forgive you for the cruelty you've shown, she said steadily, her voice echoing with the strength born of years of suffering. Meanwhile, Jack clung desperately to his arrogance. Once I inherit the hospital, I'll pay you off, Sandra, and find someone younger to replace you, he boasted bitterly. His words faltered when his bedridden father managed a weak interjection from his wheelchair. Jack, the hospital has been sold. You have no inheritance, remember, you were never legally adopted. Jack's face fell, and for a moment, he was speechless. In a final plea, he turned back to Sandra. Please, Sandra, let's start over. I promise I can change, he said, desperation lacing his tone. Holding up the small recording device as undeniable proof of the abuse, Sandra replied, I refuse, Jack. Look at what you have done to me and our child. Mr. Carter's voice thundered through the room as he ordered, Jack, leave now. Before long, the evidence sealed both the divorce between Sandra and Jack and the split between Mr. and Mrs. Carter. Public records and the undeniable recordings left no room for doubt. With no support from relatives or friends, Jack and Mrs. Carter were forced to move into a small rental apartment in Asempa. Their lives soon became a cycle of endless arguments and blame, as they struggled to earn a steady income through part-time jobs. Back in the peaceful mountain region of Asempa, Sandra's own grandfather, Grandpa Henry, decided it was time to look after his own well-being. He moved into a high-end senior home, away from the turmoil that had plagued his family. Sandra visited him often, always accompanied by her son. The little boy thrived in the fresh open air. He spent his days chasing insects, gathering wildflowers, and giggling with pure joy in a world finally free from cruelty. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the rolling hills of Asempa, Sandra sat quietly on the porch of her modest new home. Cradling her sleeping son, she listened as Williams joined her. His gentle voice broke the silence. "Sandra, you've come so far today. We still have a long road ahead, but now you have a future worth fighting for." Sandra's gaze drifted to the starry sky, and she murmured, "I know, Williams. I won't let the darkness of the past hold me back. I'm ready to build a life where love and respect replace pain and cruelty." In the soft glow of twilight, the family gathered their resolve. Though the path forward was uncertain and the scars ran deep, Sandra felt a new strength stirring within her, a promise that tomorrow could be kinder than today. And so, with hearts united and a spark of hope lighting their way, they prepared for the challenges yet to come, knowing that every new dawn in Asempa brought the chance to heal and begin again. In the bright light of a new day in Asempa, life had begun to bloom again. Williams, guided by his grandfather Henry, spent his mornings at the small workshop behind the senior home. There, he shaped clay with care and precision while also working as a lawyer to help those in need. His dedication to justice had become a proud emblem for the entire family. One crisp morning, while arranging some of Grandpa Henry's exquisite pottery for a local exhibition at the community department store, Williams met Elizabeth, a warm, cheerful woman with an inviting smile. As he adjusted a display stand, she stepped forward. "Your hands tell a story, Williams," Elizabeth said softly. "It's as if you mold not just clay, but hope itself." Williams paused, setting down his tool. "Thank you, Elizabeth," he replied with genuine warmth. "After all these hard years, every piece I create reminds me that we can rebuild beauty from pain." Their conversation flowed naturally, and in that moment, both sensed that a fresh beginning was possible. At the same time, Sandra's life was steadily healing. Rediscovering the passion that had once driven her as a nurse, she had secured a position at a nearby hospital. Every day, caring for patients and offering comfort reminded her of her mother's gentle ways and helped stitch together the wounds of her past. One afternoon, as she finished tending to a patient who whispered words of gratitude, a kindly colleague named Lily approached her. "Sandra, your kindness shines through even on the toughest days," Lily said. And so, with hearts healed by courage and surrounded by the warmth of community, their journey found its peaceful, triumphant end, a story of rebirth in Asempa, where every new dawn promised hope and a future built on love. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe if you have not. Thank you once more. Goodbye and God bless you.